They didn't use guns, they didn't leave bodies on the street, but they destroyed thousands of lives, quietly, efficiently, and for profit. One was a woman running a money shop in Chinatown. The others were armed gangsters operating across 3 continents. Together, they built the most powerful human smuggling empire in modern history. Who's more dangerous? The mastermind who never pulls the trigger, or the soldier who follows orders without question? Stay patient with me until the end, because what you'll discover might change how you see justice. Welcome to Red Dossier.
Before we move on to the next part, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening.
That question may sound absurd until you realize that the most devastating criminals don't always carry guns or knives. Some of them wear aprons, own local businesses, or speak softly while orchestrating operations that crush thousands of lives. In the dark world of human smuggling from China to the United States, 2 names cast long shadows: Cheng Ping, better known as Sister Ping, and the network of Chinese organized crime groups collectively known as the Snakehead gangs. Sister Ping was not a gangster in appearance. Born in 1949 in Fujian province, she immigrated to the US and settled in New York's Chinatown, where she ran a money transfer business. Behind the counter, however, she managed one of the largest human smuggling networks in modern history. Over the course of 2 decades, she was responsible for illegally transporting over 3,000 Chinese nationals into the US, profiting an estimated $40 million, according to US federal court documents. Unlike Ping, the Snakeheads weren't one person. They were a violent network of smugglers operating across Asia, Latin America, and North America. Some were brutal enforcers like Zhengqing or RK, a former Fujian gang member who later turned FBI informant. They were known for running camps, using threats, torture, and in many cases, murder to control both their victims and their own ranks. One expert once said, "If Sister Ping was the brain, Snakehead was the blood and fists." That's what makes this comparison so haunting. Ping represented the quiet face of criminal genius, calculated, patient, nearly invisible. The Snakeheads were fire and blood, men who believed in fear as a management strategy. Together they dominated the human smuggling pipeline for nearly 20 years, capitalizing on the chaos of mass migration in the late 20th century. At a time when millions of Chinese were desperate to escape poverty, Sister Ping and the Snakehead syndicates offered passage for a price. That price could range from $20,000 to $50,000 per person, often collected through decades of debt or forced labor in nail salons, sweatshops, or sex work. And yet, even in the face of clear exploitation, not everyone saw them as villains. In immigrant enclaves across America, stories spread of how Ping had rescued people from poverty, of how she helped families reunite. Her nickname, Sister, was not ironic. For many, it was affectionate, but good intentions don't erase a criminal empire. Both Ping and the Snakeheads exploited desperation. They built a system that turned people into cargo. The difference lay in method. Ping moved quietly, laundering money and building shell companies across multiple countries. The Snakeheads moved loudly, with knives, fists, and silence purchased through intimidation. As the story unfolds, we will explore how 2 different criminal forces shaped the same underworld. One woman, one machine. We will dissect their origins, their motivations, and their eventual downfall. And perhaps most importantly, we will confront the question, when thousands chase a dream, how do you define the villains who promise to deliver it? Cheng Shui-ping, born into a poor family in Fujian, was not a woman anyone expected to become a criminal mastermind. She was quiet, conservative, and outwardly respectable. When she arrived in New York in the early 1980s, she didn't bring an army, she brought ambition. Opening a small storefront in Chinatown, she built a reputation as someone who could help fellow Fujianese. Some needed money wired home. Others needed something more, a way to smuggle relatives out of China, and that's where her real business began. Over time, Sister Ping built a global human smuggling network that spanned China, Hong Kong, Thailand, Ecuador, Guatemala, and the US. She arranged air travel, sea routes, false documents, and underground shelters. Victims were moved like contraband, hidden in freight containers, locked in engine rooms, or smuggled over borders on foot. Each journey could last weeks or months, and the risks were staggering. In one infamous case, the 1993 Golden Venture incident, a cargo ship carrying 286 Chinese migrants ran aground off the coast of Queens, New York. 10 people drowned trying to swim ashore. The operation was tied directly to Ping and her Snakehead associates. The Snakehead gangs took care of the dirty work. These were not subtle men. They extorted families in China for payment. They beat and imprisoned migrants who couldn't pay. They used gang enforcers to recover debts and eliminate threats. The FBI described the Snakehead structure as militarized, with cells operating like paramilitary units across borders. Their method was brute force, and their message was clear. You either pay or you disappear. Psychologically, the contrast between Ping and the Snakeheads is sharp. Ping operated on a twisted logic, believing she was offering opportunity, not enslavement. She saw herself as a savior, not a smuggler. Former clients even described her as warm, disciplined, and motherly. But her compassion ended where money began. Those who failed to pay were handed over to enforcers. In the eyes of the law, she was not a mother. She was a criminal entrepreneur, one who built a multi-million-dollar empire on the backs of the desperate. The Snakehead leaders, by contrast, were pure predators. They viewed migrants as investments and their smuggling operations as territory to be defended. Internal violence was common. Informants were executed. Power shifted constantly, often through betrayal or assassination. Some gang leaders were arrested. Others disappeared entirely. One of them, Zheng Xing, was executed in China in 2001 after being extradited from Southeast Asia. Eventually, Ping made one mistake. She returned to Hong Kong in 2000, believing she could visit family undetected. She was wrong. Interpol agents, working with the US government, arrested her and extradited her to New York. In 2005, she was convicted on multiple counts of human smuggling, money laundering, and conspiracy. She was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison, where she died of cancer in 2014. Meanwhile, many Snakehead leaders suffered even harsher fates. Some were tried and executed in China. Others were handed life sentences in US federal prisons. One former leader, RK, agreed to testify against Ping in exchange for a reduced sentence, just 7 years. A light punishment for a man once feared in multiple countries. What made this criminal operation so unique was its scale and subtlety. Unlike drug cartels, which rely on violence and product flow, human smuggling relies on control, manipulation, and fear. The Snakeheads and Sister Ping exploited a global legal grey zone, weak immigration enforcement, corruption in transit countries, and the desperation of people with nothing to lose. The victims weren't criminals, they were parents, daughters, brothers, all chasing survival. And yet, when viewed through the lens of law and justice, Sister Ping and the Snakeheads were two sides of the same empire. She built it, they enforced it. Together, they turned migration into a market. But what happens when the market collapses? That's where we go next. The downfall, the legacy, and the uncomfortable questions that still remain. When the empire collapsed, it left behind more than arrests and convictions. It left behind a legacy, a question of how we define guilt in a system built on desperation. Sister Ping, convicted in 2005 and sentenced to 35 years in prison, died quietly behind bars in 2014. She had never expressed remorse. In fact, during her trial, she remained calm and composed, reportedly telling her lawyer that she had only tried to help her people. To this day, in certain Fujianese communities across New York and Los Angeles, small shrines and photos of Ping still linger. Some migrants credit her with giving them life. Literally, she was called Mother Ping, even after her death. But in the eyes of the law, Sister Ping was one of the most successful human smugglers in modern history. She helped orchestrate a multinational criminal operation that moved people like currency. The US Department of Justice called her case a milestone in dismantling the Snakehead network. She was not simply a participant, she was its architect. The Snakehead gangs, by contrast, collapsed under pressure. Internal betrayals, sting operations, and violent infighting broke the organization into fragments. Many of their leaders were arrested and tried in China, where justice was swift and merciless. Some were executed. Others disappeared entirely. And while the name Snakehead still surfaces in criminal investigations, the myth of their untouchability is gone. In raw numbers, the damage they caused was staggering. According to UN reports and US immigration investigations, over 100,000 individuals were smuggled globally by similar networks between 1980 and 2010. Sister Ping's operation alone funneled $40 million in illicit profits. Victims paid $25,000 to $50,000 per person, often through forced labor or lifelong debt. Dozens died in transit. Many more were detained, deported, or lost in the system. So how do we compare the two? Sister Ping had strategy. She avoided violence. She built trust in the community and operated like a CEO, not a gangster. But that doesn't absolve her. She used people's hope as leverage, turned dreams into contracts, and handed debtors to enforcers without a second thought. The Snakeheads had power. They ruled through violence and fear, using brutality to maintain control. Their cruelty was visible, and their fall was inevitable. But without Ping, they would have been little more than thugs. It was her infrastructure that gave their violence purpose. In short, Ping built the system. The Snakeheads protected it. That distinction matters, not to justify, but to understand. Because crime at this scale isn't just about criminals, it's about conditions, global inequality, legal loopholes, the fact that, even today, people are still willing to risk everything for a better life. This isn't just a story about smugglers. It's a story about choices, about how easily human lives become commodities, and about how the same person can be both a savior and a predator, depending on who's telling the story. So we return to that question: who's more dangerous? Someone who kills with a gun or someone who kills with a promise? And when we find our answer, are we brave enough to look at the systems that made both possible? She built the system. They enforced it. And somewhere in between, thousands of people were crushed by both. Do you think Sister Ping was a criminal or a misunderstood hero to her people? Are the Snakeheads pure villains or a product of something bigger than them? Let me know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Red Dossier for more stories that go beneath the headlines. See you in the next file.